My name is Cheryl J. Yeary. I am 57 years old, and the night my life split in half began as one of the proudest nights of my marriage. I had been married to Miles for 26 years. Before that, we were college friends for a decade. 2 years of friendship, 1 year of me pursuing him shamelessly, 7 years of dating, including long-distance stretches that tested everything. We survived distance. We survived career changes. We survived raising 2 children into adulthood. We were the couple people pointed to and said, "That's real love." And I believed it. The 35-year college reunion felt like a victory lap. We walked into the venue hand in hand, smiling at classmates who barely recognized us at first. There was music, laughter, old professors trying to remember names. It felt like stepping into a time capsule. We were proud to be one of the few couples still together. That pride feels foolish now. Early in the evening, we ran into Ricky, an old loudmouth classmate who had once flirted with anything that moved. He made some off-color jokes about how Miles had aged like wine. I rolled my eyes. Ricky was harmless. Annoying, but harmless. Then I saw her. Lisa. Lisa had been in our extended friend circle in college. Quiet, observant, pretty in a subtle way that didn't demand attention, but quietly attracted it. She had once confessed years ago that she had always admired Miles from afar. We laughed about it at the time. That night, she approached us with a warm smile. "Cheryl," she said, hugging me, "you look incredible." Then she turned to Miles, and the air shifted. I can't explain how I knew something was different. It wasn't overt. It wasn't scandalous. It was in the way she held his gaze a second too long, in the way Miles seemed flattered in a way that made his shoulders lift slightly. They started talking about old classes, old inside jokes. Lisa mentioned she had never married, said she had focused on career, said she sometimes wondered about roads not taken. I laughed politely. Miles laughed too. But I noticed something else, a softness in his expression I hadn't seen directed at anyone else in years. Nancy eventually joined them on the dance floor. Lisa danced close, too close. I watched from across the room, telling myself I was imagining things. We are in our late 50s. This is ridiculous. People flirt harmlessly at reunions all the time. About an hour later, I realized Miles and Lisa were gone. Nancy wasn't with them. I searched the ballroom, the patio, the hallway. I called Miles. No answer. When they finally returned, they didn't walk in together. Lisa came first, composed, calm, smiling faintly. Miles returned 10 minutes later. He looked different. Not guilty exactly. Shaken. And when he leaned toward me and whispered, "Can we go home?" I felt something in my chest go cold. I didn't know it yet, but the man who had walked into that reunion with me was not the same man driving home beside me. The drive home lasted a little over an hour, and it felt longer than the 26 years we had been married. Miles kept his eyes on the road. His hands were steady on the steering wheel, but his jaw was tight. I asked him twice if something had happened with Nancy. He said no. I asked if Lisa had upset him. He said no, just tired, just overwhelmed. The answers were too short, too controlled. At home, he went straight to the bedroom and lay down fully clothed. I stood in the doorway watching him. The house felt unfamiliar, like I had stepped into someone else's life. I brushed my teeth slowly, mechanically. When I got into bed, he had his back turned to me. He didn't touch me. He didn't say goodnight. I must have fallen asleep from exhaustion because I woke up to the feeling of his weight pressing against me. He was crying, not quietly, not subtly. His shoulders were shaking and his breath hitched against my chest, like he couldn't pull enough air into his lungs. I wrapped my arms around him automatically, instinctively. That's what you do when your partner breaks down. You hold them. "What is it?" I whispered. "Is it the reunion? Did seeing everyone hit you harder than you expected?" He didn't answer at first. He just cried. I felt something rising in my throat, something between dread and disbelief. When he finally lifted his face, his eyes were red and unfocused. "I did something," he said. Those 3 words hollowed me out. I didn't ask who. I didn't ask how. I didn't need to. "With Lisa," he said, barely audible. For a moment I couldn't hear anything. The world felt distant, like I was underwater. The name echoed in my head. Lisa. The way she had looked at him. The way he had smiled back. The hour he disappeared. "I went outside with her," he continued. "She said she needed air. She wanted to talk. She said she'd carried feelings for me all these years." He said it like that detail mattered. Like longevity made betrayal more romantic. I was flattered, he admitted. I felt seen. I felt wanted. I closed my eyes. 26 years, 2 children, a shared mortgage, a lifetime of shared grief and joy. And he felt wanted because a woman from his 20s whispered admiration into his ear. He told me they walked toward the old college lawn. He said she held his hand. He said she told him she had always believed they were meant to be. He said he was drunk. He said he got carried away. He said it only went so far before he realized what he was doing. He said he stopped. Stopped. The word hung in the air like a fragile thread trying to hold something together. I didn't scream. I didn't slap him. I didn't throw anything. I just stared at him, trying to locate the man I had known for nearly 3 decades. He kept talking. He kept apologizing. He said he hated himself. He said it meant nothing. He said it was a mistake. The worst part wasn't even the image of them together. It was the way he clung to me while confessing, as if I was still his safe place, as if I was supposed to absorb this and comfort him. "I don't want to lose you," he whispered. That sentence nearly broke me. I told him we would talk in the morning. I told him to sleep. He wrapped his arms around me like a child afraid of the dark. Eventually, his breathing slowed. I stayed awake. And somewhere in the middle of replaying his version of events, something didn't sit right. The lawn is open, bright, public. The old swimming complex, though, that was darker, secluded, out of sight. I remembered Nancy's expression when she returned to the ballroom. Tense, avoidant. If he had stopped because of guilt, why did Nancy look furious? I lay there until dawn, and by the time the first light touched the curtains, I knew one thing with terrifying clarity. I could not wake up beside him and pretend we were the same couple who had walked into that reunion together. Quietly, I slipped out of bed. I packed a small bag. I didn't slam doors. I didn't leave a note. I walked out before he woke up. Because if he had opened his eyes and asked me to stay, I might have. And that scared me more than the affair itself. I checked into a hotel 15 minutes away from our house, not far enough to disappear, but far enough to breathe. I turned my phone face down on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours. The silence in that room was heavier than any argument could have been. When my phone finally started ringing, it didn't stop. Our son first, then our daughter, then Miles, then again. I let it ring until the panic inside me shifted from numbness to responsibility. I couldn't let my children think something had happened to me. I called our son back. "Mom, what's going on? Dad won't tell us anything." There is no gentle way to tell your child that the family they believed in cracked in one night. I told him the truth. I told him his father had been unfaithful at the reunion. I didn't go into details. I didn't describe the images in my head. I just said enough. He went quiet, not angry, not hysterical, just stunned. "That doesn't make sense," he said. "You two, you're solid." We were. That was the worst part. I asked him not to tell his sister yet. I sent her a message saying I was handling work matters out of town. I bought myself a few hours before I would have to look into her eyes and explain why the foundation of her childhood home was now fractured. Over the next few days, I moved like someone operating machinery in shock. I searched for lawyers. I read articles about infidelity and long marriages collapsing late in life. I found stories of revenge, exposure, humiliation. I found people who staged elaborate traps. I didn't want revenge. But I also knew I couldn't pretend. I met with a lawyer who spoke calmly about asset division, retirement savings, the beach house Miles and I had planned to buy next year. We had already shortlisted properties. We had imagined watching sunsets together in our late 70s. I chose to split everything evenly, not because he deserved generosity, but because I refused to let betrayal change my character. The children took it harder than I expected. Our daughter cried openly when I finally told her the truth. She asked if I was sure. She asked if I could forgive him. She asked if this meant holidays would never be the same again. I told her I didn't know about holidays, but I knew about self-respect. Meanwhile, Miles tried to find me. He drove to old client offices. He called mutual friends. He sent messages through Nancy. He begged for one conversation. I didn't respond. If I saw him too soon, I might weaken. Nancy eventually called me directly. "I need to tell you something," she said. Her voice wasn't defensive. It was careful. She told me she had tried to stop Miles that night. She said when Lisa suggested going outside, she advised against it. She said she sensed something wrong. When they didn't return for a while, she went looking. "They weren't on the lawn," she said quietly. "They were in the swimming complex changing room." My breath caught. That wasn't the story Miles told me. He said they were outside on the grass. He said he stopped because guilt kicked in. Nancy continued. "They didn't stop because of guilt. They stopped because I walked in." The words hit harder than the initial confession. Betrayal once is devastating. But betrayal followed by a softened lie is something else entirely. It meant he wasn't just protecting himself from shame. He was protecting himself from accountability. I felt something final settle inside me. Up until then, I had clung to one fragile thread, that at least he confessed fully, that at least he told me everything. But he hadn't. He curated the story. He edited it to preserve a sliver of dignity. And in doing so, he shattered the last piece of trust that might have allowed for even the smallest chance of rebuilding. I asked Nancy to do one thing for me. I asked her to tell Miles that I knew the full truth, that I knew it wasn't a drunken lapse on a moonlit lawn, that it was a deliberate walk to a private room deep inside campus, and that I would not be reconsidering anything. A few days later, Miles signed the divorce papers. He didn't contest. He didn't argue. He didn't demand assets. But the damage had already extended beyond paperwork, and I was only just beginning to understand how deep it went. After the papers were signed, something inside me expected relief. Instead, what I felt was emptiness. The legal process was clean, clinical, almost detached. Years of shared life reduced to signatures and percentages. Our retirement savings were split. The beach house dream dissolved. Our children adjusted to separate holidays. On paper, everything was handled. Emotionally, nothing was. Nancy kept me updated about Miles because despite everything, she refused to choose sides. She said he had stopped eating, that he barely slept, that he stared at walls for hours. I believed it. I know him. When Miles feels shame, he doesn't rage, he implodes. Then came the twist I didn't expect. After the divorce became official, Miles reached out to Lisa. Part of me almost laughed when Nancy told me that. He had destroyed our marriage for her. Of course he would look to her for comfort once everything collapsed. Maybe he thought she would be waiting. Maybe he believed that their connection was real, meaningful, destined. At first, Lisa responded warmly. She told him she had always cared, that she hated how things turned out, that she wished they had more time together that night. She offered sympathy. She fed his ego the same way she had at the reunion. Then she found out the divorce was finalized, and everything changed. According to Nancy, Lisa began pulling away almost immediately. She stopped answering messages. She delayed calls. She told Miles she wasn't ready for anything serious. Eventually, she admitted something that cut deeper than any insult. She had a live-in partner. She had never intended to leave him. The reunion had been about nostalgia, validation, proving she still had power over a man who once seemed unattainable. She had wanted the thrill of finally winning the one that got away. She didn't want the responsibility of a real relationship with a nearly 60-year-old man navigating divorce. Nancy told me the exact words Lisa used. "I never promised forever," she said. "You read too much into it." She even mocked him. Said she thought he was intelligent, but apparently not intelligent enough to see through her. I sat with that information for a long time. There's a strange kind of pain in knowing the person you loved destroyed your life for someone who never valued them in the first place. It makes the betrayal feel even more hollow. Miles spiraled after that. He entered therapy. He tried to rebuild routines, but something fundamental had cracked inside him. The confident, grounded man I once admired became anxious, possessive, insecure. Our children felt it immediately. He began calling them constantly. If they didn't respond within minutes, he panicked. He asked our son to move in with him, just until things feel normal. He asked our daughter to skip weekend trips with friends so she could keep him company. He needed reassurance that he wasn't alone. Our daughter tried for nearly a year. She stayed with him after I left. She cooked, she listened. She tried to stabilize him. Eventually, she called me and said quietly, "Mom, I can't be his emotional anchor anymore." She told him the same thing, that she loved him, but she could not pause her life to compensate for his mistakes, that if he kept suffocating them, they would pull away entirely. He accused them of abandoning him. They reminded him he had abandoned us first. When she moved out, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. This wasn't victory, it was fallout. Meanwhile, I began living differently. I worked remotely. I traveled slowly instead of running. I spent time in places where my name meant nothing. I reconnected with painting, something I had abandoned, when marriage and motherhood filled every available space in my life. It was during a hiking trip in Tokyo 2 years after the divorce that I met Ethan. He was 52, recently out of an abusive relationship. We bonded over getting lost on a mountain trail and laughing at our terrible sense of direction. There was no immediate romance, no dramatic spark, just conversation, honesty, quiet understanding. We stayed in touch. 6 months later, we planned another trip together. We made rules from the beginning. No rushing, no promises, no marriage talk, just companionship. For the first time since the reunion, I felt something light instead of heavy. And that terrified me almost as much as the betrayal had. Because moving forward meant accepting that what Miles and I had was truly over. I didn't know then that 4 years later, that forward motion would collide with the past at our son's wedding. 4 years passed before I saw Miles in person again. Our son was getting married. He called me 2 months before the wedding and said carefully, "Mom, I want both of you there. I don't want to choose." I didn't hesitate. This wasn't about my discomfort. It was about our child stepping into his future. So I agreed to attend the pre-wedding dinner hosted by his fiancé's parents. When I walked into that restaurant, Miles was already seated. For a second, time folded in on itself. He looked older, not just physically, but internally. The easy confidence he once carried had been replaced with something guarded. He stood when I approached. We exchanged a polite nod. "Cheryl," he said. "Miles," I replied. That was it. We were seated next to each other. I suspect our son didn't realize this would be our first real interaction since the divorce. During dinner, Miles commented that I looked healthier, happier. I removed toxicity from my life, I said evenly. He flinched at that, just slightly. He asked if I was seeing someone. I didn't answer directly. It wasn't his business. After dinner, I said goodnight to everyone with hugs. When I reached him, I simply nodded and said, "Take care." He stood up as if expecting more. I didn't give it. But the real confrontation didn't happen that night. It happened at the wedding itself. Ethan came with me. I had told my children beforehand. They were supportive but nervous. They knew how fragile Miles could still be. The moment we arrived at the venue, I felt Miles's eyes on us. Not subtle, not discreet. He was staring at our hands. Ethan squeezed my fingers lightly. "You okay?" "I will be," I said. Before we could greet anyone else, Miles crossed the lawn toward us. He didn't greet Ethan. He didn't greet me properly either. He grabbed my wrist, not violently, but possessively. "We need to talk," he said through clenched teeth. "I don't think so," I replied calmly. "Is he your boyfriend?" he demanded. "Are you planning to marry him?" "That's not your concern." Guests were starting to notice. Our daughter rushed over, trying to de-escalate the scene. "Miles, not today," she said quietly. "I deserve to know," he insisted, ignoring her. "You forfeited that right," I said. His grip tightened for a fraction of a second, and then our daughter stepped fully between us. "Let go of her," she said in a tone I had never heard from her before. He released me. You don't get to disrupt my wedding because you're uncomfortable," she continued. Her voice was controlled, steady. "Yes, Mom was supposed to walk into events on your arm forever, but you chose Lisa. You chose that night. So either accept that she moved on, or I will have you removed before the ceremony even starts." There it was. The truth spoken without softness. Miles stared at her, then at me. For 3 long seconds, his expression shifted. Anger, betrayal, sadness. Then he stepped back. He didn't cause another scene. He stayed for the ceremony, but he stood apart. He didn't join the family photos. He didn't approach Ethan again. That night, after the reception, Nancy called me. He's devastated," she said quietly. "Seeing you with someone else made it real for him." "It's been real for 4 years," I replied. But I understood what she meant. For him, the wedding wasn't just about our son. It was the visible proof that I had built a life without him. And that realization hit harder than any legal document ever could. After the wedding, something settled in me. For years, the story of us had felt unfinished. The reunion, the confession, the hotel, the hospital, Lisa's disappearance, the divorce. It all carried tension, like a book missing its final chapter. That wedding confrontation was not explosive in the cinematic sense, but it was decisive. It drew a line in the sand neither of us could pretend not to see. Miles did not contact me after that night, not to argue, not to apologize again, not to accuse me of moving on too quickly. He withdrew into himself. Nancy told me he increased his therapy sessions, that he had finally stopped speaking about Lisa entirely, that he admitted to his therapist that what hurt most wasn't losing her. It was losing the version of himself he once respected. That sentence stayed with me, because that's the true cost of betrayal. You don't just lose your spouse. You lose the identity you had when you were loyal, trusted, solid. Our children adjusted in ways I didn't expect. They no longer defended him blindly. They no longer defended me either. They grew up in the space between us. They set boundaries with their father gently but firmly. They stopped answering midnight panic calls. They stopped carrying the emotional weight he tried to place on them. And surprisingly, he respected it. He stopped asking our son to move in. He stopped guilt-tripping our daughter about holidays. He began rebuilding a life that didn't orbit his shame. As for Lisa, she disappeared from the narrative completely. After ghosting Miles, she resurfaced once on social media with photos of trips and captions about self-discovery. It almost would have been funny if it hadn't been so empty. I felt nothing toward her, not anger, not curiosity. She had played her role and exited. The truth is, Lisa was never the core of the story. Miles was, and so was I. I continued traveling with Ethan. We didn't rush into anything dramatic. No engagement, no shared property, just companionship built slowly, intentionally. He never tried to replace my past. He simply existed beside me in the present. Eventually, I made a different decision. After years of moving from country to country, I realized I wanted something steadier again. Not marriage necessarily, not permanence in the old sense, but a home base, a place my children could gather without tension, a kitchen table where no one had to choose sides. So I rented a small house closer to them. For the first time in years, I had an address that felt like a choice rather than an escape. Sometimes late at night, I still think about that reunion. I think about the moment I saw Miles smiling at Lisa on the dance floor. I think about how quickly decades can fracture. I think about how I almost stayed in bed that night and tried to forgive him before knowing the full truth. And I realized something I didn't understand back then. Leaving wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of preservation. I did not destroy him. He made a choice. I made a boundary. There is a difference. I don't hate him. I don't wish him suffering. I don't replay the betrayal with the same intensity anymore. What I carry now is clarity. Love does not protect you from betrayal. Loyalty does not guarantee permanence, but self-respect can survive both. If there is one thing I have learned through all of this, it's that endings do not have to be explosive to be final. Sometimes they are quiet. Sometimes they are dignified. Sometimes they are just two people standing at a wedding, realizing that the life they once imagined together has already moved on. And that's okay. I thought the wedding was the last chapter. I was wrong. 6 months after our son's wedding, I received a message from him that made my hands tremble for a completely different reason. "Mom," he wrote, "you're going to be a grandmother." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Life has a way of rearranging the pieces you thought were broken beyond repair. I had imagined becoming a grandmother beside Miles, in that beach house we never bought, arguing over baby names and who would spoil the child more. That future had dissolved years ago, and yet, here it was again, just shaped differently. I called him immediately. He was glowing. His wife was nervous but excited. They wanted both parents involved, but carefully. "We'll manage it," he said. "We're adults. We can navigate this." A few days later, Miles called me. Not about money, not about Lisa, not about regret, about the baby. His voice was different, softer, measured. "I heard," he said. "Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied. There was a pause, long enough to feel intentional. "I don't expect to share this with you," he added. "I know that ship sailed. I wanted to say I'm glad you're well." It was the first conversation we had that wasn't charged with history. "I am well," I said honestly. "I hope you are too." "I'm trying," he replied. That phrase used to irritate me. It used to feel like an excuse, but this time it sounded earned. A week later, something arrived in the mail. Another letter. His handwriting again, but steadier this time. "Cheryl, I won't rewrite the past. I won't explain it again. I won't defend it. What I did cost me my marriage. It cost me your trust. It cost our children the stability they deserved. I've spent years in therapy learning that the reunion wasn't about Lisa. It was about ego, about insecurity I never admitted. I let flattery undo decades of loyalty. You were always stronger than I was. I don't ask for friendship. I don't ask for forgiveness. I only ask that when our grandchild is born, you know I will respect whatever boundaries you set. I won't compete. I won't interfere. I won't repeat old patterns. You deserve better than the version of me that night." Miles! I sat with that letter for a long time. There was no manipulation in it, no hidden plea, just ownership. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I walked outside and watched the late afternoon light stretch across the yard of the house I chose for myself. Not the beach house, not the marital home, mine. Eventually, I sent him a short message. "Thank you for taking responsibility. Boundaries will remain, but our grandchild deserves peace." He responded with one word. "Agreed." That was it. No dramatic reunion, no reconciliation arc, no late-life romance rekindled. Just two aging people acknowledging that what they built once was real, and what they broke was real too. Ethan stood beside me through all of this. He never pressured me to cut Miles out entirely. He never demanded I erase my past. He understood that long marriages don't vanish, they transform into history. When our grandchild was born, we both stood in that hospital room. Not together, but not at war. Miles stood on one side of the bed. I stood on the other. Our son held his child and looked at both of us with something like relief. The baby didn't know betrayal. The baby didn't know divorce. The baby only knew warmth. Later, when I held that tiny body against my chest, I realized something profound. The reunion didn't destroy my life. It redirected it. I lost a husband. I kept my dignity. I kept my children. And I gained a future that no longer depends on someone else's loyalty. If there's a final lesson in all of this, it's this. Betrayal may rewrite your plans, but it doesn't get to rewrite your worth. And I finally understand that now. If you had told me 5 years ago that I would eventually buy a house by the water without Miles, I would have laughed in your face. That beach house was our shared dream. We had spreadsheets, mortgage projections, sunset photos saved on our phones. We imagined early retirement, long walks, quiet mornings, grandchildren running across wooden floors. When everything collapsed, I thought that dream died with it. But last spring I bought one anyway. Not the large showpiece property we once debated over. Not something extravagant meant to prove a point. A modest house by a quieter stretch of shoreline. White siding, weathered deck, big windows facing the water. It felt like a reclamation rather than a replacement. I didn't tell Miles before I did it. I didn't need his approval anymore. When our son and his wife brought the baby for the first visit, the house felt alive in a way I hadn't expected. My daughter cooked in the kitchen. Ethan grilled outside. The baby slept in a small bassinet near the window, where you could hear the ocean breathing in and out. At one point, I stepped onto the deck alone and let the wind hit my face. There was no bitterness left in me. Only a strange kind of gratitude, not for the betrayal, but for the clarity that followed it. Miles visited once, with permission, boundaries intact. He stood awkwardly in the living room, complimented the view, and kept his distance. He didn't try to sit next to me. He didn't try to reminisce. He held the baby carefully, like something fragile and sacred. When he handed the baby back to me, he said quietly, "You always loved the ocean more than I did." "I still do," I replied. There was no accusation in it. Just truth. We don't talk about the reunion anymore. We don't dissect the confession. We don't revisit Lisa. That chapter exists, but it no longer dominates the room. Miles continues therapy. He lives modestly now. He rebuilt slowly. He doesn't date publicly. Nancy says he's quieter, humbler. I believe it. He learned something the hard way. As for me, I no longer measure my life by what I lost. Ethan and I remain partners, not because we rushed into rebuilding what I had before, but because we refused to recreate it. We move deliberately. We choose each other every day without the weight of permanence as a demand. Sometimes people ask me if I ever considered going back to Miles. The honest answer? I considered it once, in the early days, when the wound was fresh and the instinct to repair outweighed the instinct to protect. But every time I imagined it, I saw the swimming pool changing room. I heard Nancy's voice correcting his version of events. I remembered the second betrayal, the edited confession, and I knew trust would never fully return. You can forgive someone and still not rebuild with them. That's something I didn't understand at 57. I do now. If there's a final image I want to leave you with, it's this. Last Sunday evening, the sun was setting over the water. My granddaughter was asleep inside. My daughter was laughing in the kitchen. Ethan was beside me on the deck. The sky turned gold, then violet. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like something had been taken from me. I felt like I had arrived somewhere honest. Life didn't end at the reunion. It changed shape, and I chose to shape it back.